okay.
It's cloudy here too.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Geopolitical Intelligence Services webinar on security and cooperation in Central and Eastern Europe. I'm Andrew Kurth, Managing Editor at GIS, and I'm delighted to have you all join us for this very important discussion. Today, we'll be exploring the profound impact of Russia's war in Ukraine on the security landscape of Central Europe. Our esteemed guests, Ivan Miklos, former Minister of Finance of Slovakia, and Markiyan Malskyy, former ambassador of Ukraine to Poland, bring a wealth of experience and insights to the table. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll hear from each of our guests as they provide their perspectives on the challenges and opportunities for cooperation in the region. Following their statements, we'll open the floor to questions from you, our audience, for a deeper dive into the issues at hand. Ambassador Malskyy, Minister Miklos, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, thank you.
So without further ado, let's delve right into the discussion. As I said, both of our guests today have opening statements. So why don't we start with Minister Miklos. Minister Miklos, could you speak for a little bit on our topic of today?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for inviting me on this really actual and important topic. Of course, everybody knows that after invasion of Russia to Ukraine, situation dramatically changed in the security and cooperation in Central and Eastern Europe, and now I think everybody will agree that it is a real threat not only for Ukraine, which is fighting not only on behalf of themselves but also on behalf of other, especially neighboring countries and former communist countries, which Moscow openly is saying that they want again to gain control over these countries and territories. I will mention, maybe because just now, a few days ago, it was published new survey and the new study of the Globsec. Globsec is a Slovakian think tank, but international think tank based in Slovakia, the biggest think tank in Central and Eastern Europe, which is working exactly with this topic, security and cooperation in Central Eastern Europe. And Globsec yearly is providing very deep analysis of the public opinion in the 9 countries. There are 3 Baltic countries, then there are Visegrad 4, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, and then there is Eastern Balkan countries, which means Romania and Bulgaria. And let me conclude what are the most important of this very fresh public opinion survey on exactly this topic. First, there is overall support in all these 9 countries regarding the European Union and NATO membership of these countries. 78% of people in these 9 countries are supporting staying in EU, and 81%, which means even more, is supporting staying in NATO. Important shift is also in public opinion in favor of increasing defense spending, which is again very positive news. Then people in these countries, Central Eastern European countries, have increased perception of the Germany and the role of Germany in the safety and defense in Europe. 56% of people consider Germany has to play important role in this regard. Then it is also increasing support for Ukrainian membership in the European Union and NATO. But in what I'm speaking now about is average figures in all these 9 countries, but there are some significant differences. Unfortunately, the worst situation in this regard is in Bulgaria, and even the worst is in my country, in Slovakia. But in general, there is support for Ukrainian membership in EU and in NATO. Then 74% of people, which is again majority, are in favor of military support for Ukraine, which is again very good news. But at the same time, About half of population is afraid that by supporting Ukraine, Central and Eastern European countries are provoking Russia and bringing themselves closer to potential war with Russia. It is also this public opinion polls measured also persistent xenophobia in Central European countries. Less xenophobia regarding Ukrainian migrants. They are mostly welcomed in these countries, but regarding relation to migrants from another countries, especially out of Europe countries, there is majority of people who don't agree with this. Good news is that there is rising trust to media and NGOs, which is maybe surprising in this period of let's say illiberalism growing, but this is positive news. And also, the just 16% in average of Central Eastern European respondents would like to leave European Union, which means strong support for European Union. And then not such important for our topic, but what is, I think, important is strong support, and this is important, strong support with statement that EU should start building its own army to limit dependence on the US. This is, I think, very important. From this agreement is a major agreement. Majority of people in all these 9 countries agree with this. Agreement is coming from 57% with this statement in Czech Republic to 71%, which is strongest support for own military capacities in Romania. What is, as I said, it is overall picture. But speaking about the differences in countries, it is necessary to say in general that the biggest support for NATO, for EU, for support of Ukraine, for support of EU and NATO membership of Ukraine is among Baltic countries, Poland, Romania, and Czech Republic. Much less in Hungary, then less in Bulgaria, and the least, unfortunately, in Slovakia. Slovakia and Bulgaria are the least pro-NATO countries, but good news, here is also good news that year-on-year change between 2024, now, this year, and last year, support for NATO is growing, both in Bulgaria and in Slovakia as well. In Bulgaria, support for NATO membership increased year-on-year from 58% last year to 62% this year. And even steeper support increase for NATO membership was in Slovakia from 58% last year to 69% this year. These are relatively good news, but there are also some bad news, especially in these countries. Regarding Russia and the understanding that Russia is threat for this part of Europe particularly, 66% in average of all these nine countries' inhabitants agree that Russia is threat for themselves. But there are big differences in this between countries. The biggest, what is of course natural that perception as of Russia as threat increased significantly between 2020 after Russian invasion to Ukraine. Now, at present, in Poland, 90% of people agree that Russia is threat. Then Lithuania, 82%. But less than 50% people think that Russia is threat in Slovakia, 49% only. Hungary, 47%, and in Bulgaria, only 34%, which means only 1/3 of people consider Russia as a threat today. Another worrying news is relatively high anti-Americanism, especially in Slovakia and Bulgaria. In Slovakia, 41% people think that US is security threat for my country. 41%. Bulgaria 33%, Czech Republic 17%, least of course in Baltic countries 16%, and in Poland 5%. Then, very important issue is regarding, and this is I think the most warning and also maybe sometimes even shocking result is that is answered in Slovakia and Bulgaria especially for the question who is responsible for war in Ukraine. And here, of course, in Poland, 81% people are saying that Russia is responsible for this war, and only 11% are saying that either Ukraine or Western countries. But in Hungary, 55% Russia is responsible, 38% Ukraine or West. Bulgaria, 44% Russia responsibility, but more, 46% Ukraine or Western world. And in Slovakia, even worse, 41% consider Russia is responsible, and 51%, which means more than half from all population, think that the responsibility for the war in Ukraine lies on Western world or Ukraine. This is really for me also shocking results, which is also a result of Russian propaganda, of course, also result of deeper historical reasons why these pro-Russian sentiments in Slovakia are relatively strong. And it is, of course, also because the propaganda, not only Russian propaganda, but propaganda of the Slovak parties, which created government after last elections, which we had in autumn of last year. Which means I will conclude now by speaking about these figures. There are even more figures. They are available. These results of the public opinions in these 9 countries are available on the website of Globsec. A good illustration of the situation in Slovakia is that Globsec organized every year huge international forum in June, in the beginning of June. This year, for the first time after many years, this forum will be placed in Prague in end of August, which is the result of the current political situation in Slovakia and our very strange government, which is now fighting against the liberal democracy, which is trying to diminish freedom of media and so on. But let me conclude by saying that I consider really important for a whole this region how war in Ukraine will be finished, and only good result not only for Ukraine but for Europe, whole Europe and whole world is to push out Russian troops out of internationally recognized the border of Ukraine. And only then, I think, international rule of law and to prevent from having situation when borders are changed by force, because it could be really disastrous precedents, not only for Ukraine but also for whole world, but especially for the Central and Eastern Europe. And last point, which I want to say, that these differences which we have seen on these figures, which I have mentioned, are of course very detrimental also for cooperation, for closer cooperation among these countries of Central and Eastern Europe. And another good evidence of this is our tensions, which are now, for instance, in Visegrad 4, which is natural kind of neighborhood, a group of countries, which on one side we have Polish government and Czech government, which is strongly supporting Ukraine and by weapons and so on. And on other side we have Hungary and Slovakia, which have Hungary, Orban's government, which is openly building a liberal society and supporting directly or indirectly Putin. And Slovakia, unfortunately, is very close to this as well. On the contrary, last sentence, Very good news from Slovakia is that people don't agree, a significant number of people don't agree with this. We organized just a few days ago, it was started the initiative, civic initiative, Munition for Ukraine, where ordinary people have been collected more than $4 million for Ukraine for munition, which is, for instance, 4 times more than official help of Slovenian government, or 2 times more than official help of island for this purpose. Which means Slovakian society, from these figures, it is really not very nice picture of Slovakia, but Slovakian society is polarized. The half of people, unfortunately, are have this kind of strange opinion, but the second half of people are really mobilizing themselves and supporting Ukraine as much as possible. Thank you.
That's, yeah, absolutely fascinating. A lot of those figures were really interesting, especially the ones on Bulgaria, which I personally hadn't known a lot about. And I'm sure that our audience will have a lot of questions for you to kind of delve deeper into why these differences exist between the various countries. I want to remind our audience, I've been told that we have quite a few audience members today, so thank you for joining us. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat for our guests, because we'll be answering them in a few minutes. But with that, I would like to pass the microphone, as it were, to our next guest, Ambassador Markiyan Malskyy. Ambassador, could you please give your comments about the security and cooperation dynamic in Central Europe at the moment?
Okay, thanks so much. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's really a good chance for me to take part in our webinar. I am talking with you from the Faculty of International Relations of Lviv University, one of the largest schools of international relations and the oldest school of diplomacy here in our region. So let me start maybe with some general academic points of view. The biggest war in Europe since the World War II adversely affects almost all spheres of our life: the global security, prosperity, private life, environment, and of course, this war fundamentally transforms the international system. Russian-Ukrainian war marks a turning point, a tectonic shift in world affairs. And this is quite obvious that this requires a new approach to the contribution to the construction of a new world order. This war raised the question of a new paradigm of international order and a new paradigm of international security. Of course, this Russian aggression has dramatically shaped the course of European contemporary history. In this case, the main questions for our academic community is what in this process is our role of scientists and experts, role of diplomats, what we can do, we who do not devise political decisions and political strategy. In this case, I think we can propose certain minimum boundary conditions, red lines which could be used in negotiations among the main actors of the regional and global arena, negotiation on new international order. The fundamental question in this case is what should be the essence of this new international order? It seems to me that some arrangements could be adopting the following common objectives. The first one is the new world order cannot be imposed. It should be negotiated, or more importantly and more likely, formed in the process of mutual adaptations of those states which collectively face new regional challenges and risks. The second one is that the primary purpose and meaning of the desired world order is this period of rapid and accelerated changes is not simply to maintain the status quo and stability, but also to implement change management, how to manage the change, how to create the conditions for the effective prevention of a new great war. We all understand that Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine in 2022 has set alight one of the bloodiest conflicts in Europe since World War II. This invasion marked a dramatic escalation of the more than 10-year-old war between countries and a historic turning point for European security. Ukraine became a battleground in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea and began arming and abetting separatists in the Donbas region in the country's southeast. Russia's seizure of Crimea was the first time since World War II that a European state annexed the territory of another. The hostilities marked a clear shift in the global security environment from a unipolar period of United States dominance to a new one, defined by renewed competition between major world powers. Some Western analysts see the main reason of Russia's 2022 invasion as the culmination of the Kremlin's growing resentment toward NATO's post-Cold War expansion into the former Soviet sphere of influence. Other experts have said that perhaps the most important motivating factor for Putin was his fear that Ukraine would continue to develop into a modern Western-style democracy that would inevitably undermine his autocratic regime in Russia. It was always Putin's goal to restore Russia to the status of great power in northern Eurasia. The end goal was not to recreate the Soviet Union, but to make Russia great again. The wish of Ukrainian people is that this aggressive Russian war must end justly on the basis of the UN Charter and international law, but not somehow. Ukraine has presented its vision of the path to peace and fundamental principles of a new world order. President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, presented this vision to the UN General Assembly at the end of at the G20 summit as a Ukrainian peace formula. This plan is the Ukrainian answer to the whole series of new global challenges provoked by Russian aggression against Ukraine. In this formula, Ukraine introduces a set of solutions that need to be implemented in the future world order. Among them, of course, there are 10 items, and I think that today the main task of Ukrainian diplomacy is to open eyes in many countries to this Ukrainian peace formula. The first one is radiation and nuclear safety. Because of high risk of radioactive disaster, Ukrainian proposal is to send special missions of International Atomic Energy Agency to all Ukrainian nuclear plants. Such missions can verify that any hostile activity against Ukrainian nuclear facilities has indeed ceased. The same goes for the crazy threat of nuclear weapons that Russian officials resort every time. Next challenge, food security. Ukraine is ready to expand the grain export initiative to other partners. Each country has joined the project Grain from Ukraine with a specific contribution and become a co-creator of the victory over hunger and food crisis. Third, energy security. These days, but especially last winter, we can witness an attempt to turn the winter into a weapon against millions of peoples. More than 50%, right now even much more, of our energy infrastructure, plants, transformers, electricity supply lines were destroyed by the strikes of Russian missiles and Iranian drones. The next one is the very important point of this formula is to release of all prisoners and deportees. Implementation of the UN Charter and restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity, withdrawal of Russian troops, and armed formation from the territory of Ukraine, full Ukrainian control over all sections of state border with Russia, restoration of peace, very important point. It should endorse establishment of the special tribunal regarding the crime of Russia's aggression against Ukraine and the creation of an international mechanism to compensate for all damages caused by this war. The eighth challenge is ecocide, the need for immediate protection of the environment. During the climate summit in Egypt, President of Ukraine proposed a platform to assess the environmental damage of war. This is not just a Ukrainian problem. This is a challenge for the whole world. The next, of course, the prevention of escalation. Ukraine is not a member of any of the alliances. It does not have any security assurances either. That is why Ukraine prepared a draft agreement, the Kyiv Security Compact, and has already presented it to partners. And the 10th confirmation of the end of the war. UN, under the umbrella of UN, some countries, Ukraine and Russia. Of course, we are talking about the position of different countries in Central Europe. Let me just mention here that the concept of Central Europe has become already the key concept of Ukrainian foreign policy and Ukrainian diplomacy in this region. We all know that the earliest and the most principal positions on the Russian aggression were formulated by Poland and the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Poland has responded to the war since its early days immediately. Poland has become a huge hub for supplying Ukraine with weapons, arms, ammunition, different kinds of humanitarian aid, and so on and so on. Poland also received more than 5 million Ukrainian refugees. Russia's war against Ukraine has brought a new dynamic to Central Europe, shaking the region's self-understanding and its relationship to the EU's decision-making center in Western Europe. Let me say that the leaders of Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Baltic states have taken a decisive lead in helping Ukraine in different ways. Just beginning with weapons and humanitarian aid.
Can I ask you to begin to start concluding, if possible, so that we can get...
So then the question is that we have to rethink the concept of Central Europe with Ukraine as its member. because this decisive interlink and interdependence between the survival of Ukraine as a sovereign state, its transformation into a Central European state, and its accession to EU and NATO are unfortunately not obvious to many in the West. So I think that there are a lot of different estimations, a lot of scenarios of development of the events here, and the different approaches to the end of this war. But first of all, it's quite clear that the fate of Europe today is here in Ukraine. We have to fight together with Russian aggression in order to defend peace, stability, and prosperity in Europe. It's quite clear that the future of democratic, prosperous Europe lies today on the battlefield here in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Malskyy. Very well said. A lot of interesting things to think about and to talk about, and I'm sure that our audience will have some questions on that. I already have a few questions from our audience. One of them, and either one of you can take this on, but Minister Miklos was talking about the various sentiments in Central Europe, and that is, don't people in Central and Eastern Europe, don't they fear again Russian tanks potentially coming through their cities already? Both Prague and Budapest have historical experience of this, except that there are very different sentiments in those countries. Why do you think it is that that imprint of history isn't making as much of an impact as one might guess?
Yeah, I think it is not only Prague and Budapest, it is of course also Bratislava. Slovakia was part of Czechoslovakia in '68 and in Hungary in '56. But the answer is that yes, some people are afraid, some people are not afraid. In general, people in the Czech Republic are more afraid. People in Slovakia are less afraid, at least from this public opinion polls figures, it is clear. Maybe it is also because, as I said, some historical reasons which are deeply rooted in the history, but also because in Slovakia, Russian troops have been connected with the continuity of communism after '68, after Prague Spring. And in principle, the difference between Slovakia and Czech part of Czechoslovakia was that communism brought more positive results for Slovakia than for Czech Republic, because Slovakia historically was very underdeveloped part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, then also of the Czechoslovakia, which means during 40 years of central planned economy and communist regime, Slovakia was built as industrial country, of course, with a lot of problems, inefficiency, ineffectivity of the central planned economy. But in principle, people don't have such negative perception of the communism here in Slovakia as they have in Czech Republic, with Czech part of Austrian-Hungarian Empire was the most developed part of the empire and more oriented to the West and so on, which means it is very complex phenomena which has a lot of historical, sociological, other economic reasons why some people don't have fear, regardless the very bad historical experience which we have had, for instance, in 60s from Russian troops. They went here to Czechoslovakia.
Fascinating. Ambassador Malskyy, how realistic is it, do you think, to expect at some point NATO contingents to be actually based in Ukraine?
Yeah, it seems to me that it's a very difficult question. There are a lot of talks and different opinions in Western mass media about the possibility. Even for example, President of France declared his wish and will to send troops to Ukraine. But it seems to me that during the war, it is simply impossible. And after the war, also it will raise a lot of questions. The main thing is Ukraine is going to be a member of NATO. That is the only way that can guarantee peace and security in this region. This is the only way that can stop possible Russian aggression in the future. So it seems to me that from some diplomatic point of view, it's such a political game, just such declarations about the possible station of Western or NATO soldiers in Ukraine. We have to see a lot of different things. Of course, the first thing is to stop the war, to finish the war, then to sign a treaty, and then we will discuss the future of European architecture of security in this region. Let me just say once again, the main point is free and secure Europe needs Ukraine as a member of NATO. The membership, the Ukraine's membership in NATO means peace in this region. It seems to me that Ukraine did a lot in order to meet all requirements of NATO memberships. Of course, with every NATO summit, Ukrainians expect some positive results. We were a little bit disappointed when NATO summit in Vilnius did not bring us strong positive results. We are just dreaming about next steps at the summit in the United States, NATO summit in Washington. So, once again, just full membership in NATO means full, long peace in Europe.
What do you think about the timeline in terms of Ukrainian membership for NATO, if it's so crucial? Because I think that the generally accepted idea is that, well, the war has to be over. There has to be some.
Yeah, right.
But there are some. I'm sitting in Warsaw, Poland, and there are some voices I hear sometimes of people saying, "Well, we can accept the part of Ukraine that currently isn't undergoing conflict or active conflict, not the front lines or these occupied territories. We could actually physically accept that into NATO first. Is that even realistic?"
Some fundamental things must occur. First of all, defeat of Russia, end of the war, then reforms of Ukrainian state and Ukrainian army, and then joining NATO.
Thank you very much. Minister Miklos, as a former finance minister, can you address how Central European countries ought to manage the need to increase defense spending while also sending financial aid to Ukraine? It seems like that's a big financial responsibility, and Central European countries have stepped up to it, but I don't know, how long can they manage this? The money, doesn't grow on trees.
Yeah, they're already doing this. As you know, Poland has shared to military expenditures to GDP more than 4%, which is approaching 5% even. Other countries are at least around 2%. My country, Slovakia, before war in Ukraine had somewhere below 2%. Now, last 2 years, we are reaching 2%, which means all these countries and support for Ukraine per capita in the Baltic countries, but also in Slovakia, in Czech Republic, in Poland, is the highest. In Denmark is the highest in the world. Of course, not in overall amount, which is the biggest from US and from EU, but per capita support is the highest, which means, yes, for these countries, it is kind of a burden to increase military spending and at the same time to support Ukraine. But it is possible to do thanks to the convergence, thanks to the fact that in principle, these countries are growing quicker than Western European countries because they are coming from the lower economic level and because they are doing reforms and they are converged to the Western European countries. Even now, just now, it was published the new figures that GDP per capita or salary, our salary in some of Central European countries is even higher than in some Southern European countries like Greece, Spain, Portugal, even Italy, which means this is closely connected with the reforms, because if reforms are done, if growth is high and sustainable, if the economic convergence is going on, then it is easier, of course, also to spend more for military, for defense, and also for supporting Ukraine. In this case, for instance, for Slovakia, could be problem that current government, but with those political parties which are in power now, they ruled the country even before, and they didn't do reforms. And thanks to this lack of reforms, Slovakia is lagging behind in the convergence, and we have lower economic growth. Which means in this case, then it is more difficult to increase military expenditures and also support Ukraine. It is connected with the reforms and the sound and responsible economic policy. If reform policy continues, then also sources are available.
Do I understand correctly that most of the financial aid is distributed through the European Union, or are there direct transfers from CEE countries?
No, most from these countries are direct. That's the reason also why these countries have much more than, for instance, Western European countries. Which means there is one model is from EU, which is going directly from the EU budget, and then there are bilateral support, which is both military and one is official support by government money and government sources. Another one, of course, is private support. For instance, Slovakia has strong military industry, which means by munition, by other, based on the private companies export of munition, Slovakia has a very, very high proportion of the export of the military production to Ukraine, which is supporting, of course, Ukraine in war.
Thank you. Ambassador Malskyy, you were ambassador to Poland, and as we know, Poland and Ukraine have a long history. In recent history, very good partnership. Ukrainians have been immigrating to Poland for years now, even long before the war started in 2014. But also, some difficult points in their history. But now Poland is one of Ukraine's biggest supporters. How is the view in Ukraine, and how is your view on Poland's role at the moment in terms of Central European security and cooperation?
Thank you. From the same beginning of the Ukrainian independence, when Ukraine gained independence in 1991, Poland played and is still playing an enormously great role in, first of all, in our strategic partnership, and today Poland strongly supports and gives us all possible aid in order to fight with the Russia. But let me say a few words concerning the first questions, and maybe combined with with my answer on these questions. You see that we are talking about Central Europe, and beyond this Russia's unprovoked full-scale invasion, much has led to the new geopolitical reality in this part of Europe, in Central Europe. And of course, there are some very important things. First of all, Ukraine's incredible ability to resist successfully. Then the readiness of the transatlantic West to support Ukraine, not just to win the war, but also to speed up our joining to European Union and NATO. That really means, and not only Poland, but all countries of Central Europe play here a very important role. That really means that Ukraine is redrawing the line between Europe and Eurasia. And there is, from my point of view, every reason to say that a new geopolitical region has occurred in the eastern flank of the EU and NATO. Could be identified as a new Central Europe. And this new Central Europe, of course, needs new policies, new approaches, new roles of the countries of this region. And that's quite clear that this new policy and the results, one of the results of this new policy should be the EU and NATO enlargement to the east, with the accession of Ukraine. And of course, it is quite clear today that after the war, the geopolitical future of Ukraine became non-alternative. If Ukraine is to survive as an independent state, it has to become a member of EU and NATO. The sooner, the better. And of course, Poland plays here extremely important role, a great supporter. Even after, even during the war, supplying with all necessary means for our fight with Russia. I think that after the war, Poland will play a very important role in rebuilding Ukraine, in recovering Ukraine economy. Today, there is a great movement, business movement in Poland, just concentrating all their efforts on the possibility to get the money sources to restore Ukrainian economy. Let me just say one thing. A month ago, we in Warsaw, 7 universities from the United States, Belgium, Italy, Poland, Ukraine formed a University U7 consortium with the main project recovery of Ukraine on the principle of justice, law, and so on and so on. So Poland, the role of Poland is simply extremely important, and we can hardly overestimate it.
Thank you very much. I want to, before I get to the next question, I want to really encourage our audience to feel free to ask questions and chime in, because there's not a lot of time left, but we do still have a little bit of time for a few more questions. But I want to hit on that point that you just mentioned, the recovery of Ukraine and Central Europe's role in it. And since you, Ambassador Malskyy, just said something on it, maybe Minister Miklos can say something, because I imagine despite maybe the lukewarm, let's say, support, at least from the Slovakian government, maybe from the Slovakian people for Ukraine, I imagine that once the war is over and it comes time to rebuild Ukraine, that Slovakian companies, just like Polish companies and Czech companies and Bulgarian companies, will be very interested in going to Ukraine and being involved in the recovery.
Yeah, surely. Let me at the beginning say, because it is questioned there, what is the source of data, which I have mentioned in my introductory speech, which means I will just mention is GlobSec. GlobSec Trends 2024 is the source of all this data. There are much more data there. Regarding reconstruction and the participation of the CE countries on this, of course, for Ukraine, the biggest challenge will be how to manage successfully together 3 processes. It is post-war reconstruction, integration to EU, and also reforms, necessary reforms, because reforms are necessary precondition for being successful. In this regard, it will be very important how they will be able also to use effectively the sources, which will be from official sources, donors, but also private investment. Very important point is that without significant increase of the foreign direct influx, investment influx, it couldn't be possible successfully reconstruct and modernize Ukrainian economy. For that, EU integration and economic reforms are important because still, for instance, one of the biggest problem in Ukraine, and I spent 5 years in Ukraine advising the Ukrainian government, and now I'm still in very close touch with the Ukrainian situation. And of course, there is a lot of to do in reform, especially in law enforcement, in rule of law, in everything connected with this. Because, as I said, without private direct foreign direct investment, it couldn't be possible to have this reconstruction successful. Which means one thing is also the schemes already now. Ukraine, in cooperation with international financial institutions, is working, for instance, on the de-risking of the insuring, for instance, against systemic risk of the political risk of the military risk, especially war risk, and a lot of investors are waiting. But till war continues, it is really difficult to expect that it will be such significant amount of FDI because, of course, FDI is afraid from the risk. In this regard, it is also important that EU integration should be possible, and also influx of foreign direct investment will be possible only when after war will be finished, because till then, of course, it is impossible to expect that Ukraine will enter European Union in a situation when we don't know where is the border of the Ukraine, because finally it will be border of European Union, which means it is very difficult situation, and that's only additional reason why it is necessary to help Ukraine more, much more, especially militarily, also financially, which is true that it is going this help. And what countries are doing, every country, every membering country, but not only membering country, is already preparing itself, and business is preparing, which means, for instance, also in Slovakia, we have plenipotentiary of the government for this. We have a list of companies which have been applying for, and they are trying to be prepared in advance when it will be possible to do. Something is possible to do even now, of course, because still life is going on. Economy is working in Ukraine. I have to say that surprisingly good and positive, for instance, regarding macroeconomic stability, currency rate stability. The rate of national bank, for instance, is decreasing in Ukraine. In Russia, on the contrary, was increasing during last 1 year, which means still it is possible to do something, and some companies are still even now trying to find new possibilities. But overall change of the situation we can expect only after war will be finished.
We talk about the support, the great support from Central and Eastern Europe of Ukraine, and you know, the economic support, and yet there are places where there are tensions. There's disagreements. I'm thinking specifically of trade disagreements. As you know, I'm sitting here in Warsaw, and we're going back and forth about Ukrainian grain. And there's one side that says, you know, that the Polish farmers need to be protected, and that, you know, how can we help Ukraine if we're not helping our own farmers? And there's another side that says, well, the best way for us to help Ukraine is to buy their grain. So how do we manage these trade disagreements, and how do we you know, use trade to our advantage when it comes to Central Europe supporting Ukraine? Maybe I'll let Ambassador Malskyy take that on first.
Okay, thank you. You know, right now it seems to me that we are on a good way of resolving this problem. It seems to me that it is a good result of diplomatic cooperation between our countries. There were a lot of working meetings between both sides, meetings of presidents, prime ministers, cabinets of ministers of both countries. As far as I know, I got this information just yesterday, that a group of Polish farmers is going to visit Ukraine to meet Ukrainian farmers and to discuss this problem. It seems to me that Ukraine and Poland use all possible diplomatic tools to resolve the problem. I really believe that it is a part of our, it's maybe some kind of obstacle of our attempts to join the European Union as soon as possible. But using all our experience in cooperation, principle of strategic partnership, it seems to me that the problem is almost resolved. At any rate, we have no blockade at Polish-Ukrainian borders right now.
Yeah, maybe I'm not such optimist in this because I think it will be a very long-term problem. It will be necessary to negotiate. It will be necessary to have some compromise. It will be necessary to have some transition period. Because look, it is very good illustration. Poland is one of the strongest supporter of Ukraine. Poland now has also pro-European government, and despite of this, we have, of course, this problem because the substance of the problem is, of course, very cheap Ukrainian production, which is cheap because the soul is one of the best in the world, and at the same time the costs are lower because Ukraine is simply a poorer country than Poland and other Central and Western European countries, which means for the long time we will have this proportion, and you can see how sensitive it is even for the country which is stronger supporter of EU, how sensitive it is for the farmers. And of course farmers are very strong political constituency in not only in Poland, in every country, which means and it will be one of the very sensitive also question to solve for the next or future membership of the Ukraine in European Union. And it is no other way how to solve this, to have changes on both sides, which means on one side to have some compromise, some let's say transition period in which support for the Ukrainian reforms will be lower, which will be maybe also some limitations, some quantitative limitations in some Ukrainian products exporting to Europe. But also on the European side, they have to be changes because European agriculture policy is changing also. Just a few years ago, European Union spent more than 50% of overall budgetary expenditures on subsidies for agriculture. Now it is going down, but still it is significant, which means from both sides it will be necessary to have some changes, some compromise. And but I hope that, and I'm a strong supporter of the Ukrainian membership in the European Union because I think that the new competition, including in agriculture, will even speeding up necessary reforms in the common agriculture policy in Europe to have more competition, to have lower prices finally for the consumers as well.
Absolutely.
But let me just add one thing.
Sure.
We should understand that the main reason of this problem is Russian aggression and the war.
Of course.
Of course. Well, we are just about out of time. So if our guests have some final statements, any final thoughts, now is the time to let us know. Ambassador Malskyy?
Yeah, sure. Let me very shortly. You know that we right now are in an extremely difficult situation. A Russian offensive is extremely strong, but we will keep fighting. We have no choice. We want to live, but the outcome of the war is not just down to us. We need your help. We need your support. We need, first of all, support of our neighbors, Central European countries. And thank you so much for all you have already done and you are doing, helping us in our fight with Russian aggressors. Thank you.
Minister Miklos?
Yeah, I very agree that Ukraine is now fighting not only for itself, but Ukraine is fighting for us, for whole Europe, and especially for countries which are neighbors and who are close to Ukraine. Very important. The most important now is to help Ukraine much more in every area, but especially in military area, because this is peace will be only unfortunately when Ukraine will win this war, and then we have to be ready also to support Ukraine in entering NATO and EU, because it is really win-win situation. It is. We have a lot of evidences when Central European countries entered the European Union that it was win-win. It was not beneficial only for the new member countries, but for whole Europe. And Ukraine has huge potential for strengthening not only itself, but also strengthening whole Europe. But we have to help Ukraine.
Thank you very much. So, as I said, unfortunately, our time together today has come to an end. We'd like to extend our sincere gratitude to our guests, Ivan Miklos and Markiyan Malskyy, for their valuable insights and perspectives today. If you found today's discussion insightful and thought-provoking, we invite you to explore further analysis on this topic and many more topics on our website at gisreportsonline.com. Minister Miklos, Ambassador Malskyy, thank you both for your expertise and contributions to today's conversation.
Thank you. Bye.
So thank you very much, and let me invite you to visit Lviv and my university. Lviv today is fighting, but it is a rather safe city. Please, we invite you.
Well, I would very gladly come, and I'm sure that our attendees will as well. And to our attendees, we appreciate your engagement and participation. We hope you found today's webinar informative and stimulating. So on behalf of the entire GIS team, we wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Until next time, goodbye.